You cannot get away from it. You are in a vibrational and emotional relationship with who you have become constantly, eternally, forevermore. Deal with it. We want you to be aware of it, because when you are consciously aware that there is a vibrational attitude or beingness that has occurred because of what you have lived, then you can start feeling your way into emotional and vibrational alignment with it. For example, so Esther and her sister's husband had a lovely meal in Del Mar, and then decided to stop at the grocery store for some water and milk. And while they were in the grocery store, an 18-year-old lovely little girl in her new-to-her Mustang was driving on a wet street. Her car got away from her. It was impossible to even imagine how she got up so much speed in such a short period of time. And she buried the nose of her little Mustang in the nose of Esther's Cadillac Escalade. Buried it in the nose of Esther's car and the Jaguar that was sitting next to it. She couldn't have picked two better cars to bury her nose in. And when Esther saw it, the cars were stuck together. The tow trucks had to pull them apart. Esther was not happy. Her exact words were, "You have got to be kidding me." They were there for quite a while, exchanging information. And Esther was thinking to herself, how could someone be so irresponsible as to let their car get away from them and make such a mess of my beautiful car for no reason? This was just unnecessary. And her father was there, and he was very, very mad at her. And Esther liked that. Because Esther was very, very mad at her too. No reason for this. And then, as things unfolded and the cars were apart, and Esther realized that her car was drivable. In fact, everything worked. The headlights worked. She could not have picked a better spot. Even the signals worked. The car drove normally. It can be repaired. And so as Esther sort of settled down from it, she began recognizing the discord that she had caused herself by her knee-jerk response to a situation and her subsequent departure from who she really is. Now, we have to say to you that that wavered quite a bit. As she was mad and then not mad, and then mad, and then not mad. And every time she thought about what this now meant, she got mad. So she found that she could choose whether to be mad or not mad, but mad seemed more appropriate under the conditions. It just did. It just did, especially when she looked at her car, or especially when others looked at her car and she knew they were thinking that she did it, that she did it, that she did it. Esther wanted to make a sign. I did not do this. I did not do this. But in her heart, she knew she had done it. That was the thing that made her, once again, curse law of attraction. So she began sort of reporting to those who were around her. I'm not as bothered by the paint and metal that has to be reconfigured as I am about my point of attraction. I guess I've just been feeling so sorry for myself and feeling vulnerable, and so this is what has come of this. But that thought felt bogus and awful. But it also somehow had little resonance. In other words, things like that shouldn't happen to people who are deliberate creators, and yet there it was, a big hole in the front of her car. And so, as they were pulling the cars apart, her brother-in-law had said, "You know, Esther, I don't think you're going to have too much trouble with this car. This car is a tank." And when they pulled the cars apart, everything seemed fine. They drove away. She drove it here. You can see it if you'd like. Just don't take pictures and put them on the internet. She doesn't care. And so then she was visiting with us about it, wanting to know what her point of attraction, what does this mean about my point of attraction? And we explained to her that we are not going to make her the exception in the universe. You are not the exception in the universe. Of course, everything that happens to you is part of your attraction. And then she recalled that at the intersection, as they turned in to the grocery store just before, a car had run a red light right in front of them, and the other cars had honked. And Esther had commented, glad they didn't collide because we would have been innocently involved in their wreck. Those had been her words right before this. So now she's starting to see some of the correlation between how things come together. And then we said to her, Esther, your Cadillac is a tank, and you are a tank too. And Abraham Hicks Publications is a tank. In other words, of course there are cosmetic things that you're working on all the time. Of course there are things that you're molding into place all the time. But you are strong and you are stable, and this is analogous to the stability of that which you are. So she said, I'm going to drive that car around with a big hole in it for a while until they can fix it. What we're getting at here is you can take every situation in the world and you can look at it through your physical eyes, which are often leaning more in the direction of vulnerability, or through your non-physical eyes, who are always looking for your strength. The source within you knows who you are, knows the stability of your being, and never sees anything that you're living in the attitude of vulnerability to you, because the source within you knows the backup systems you've got going on. Do you understand what we're getting at? As you are determined to feel your power rather than your weaknesses, your strengths rather than your weaknesses, your clarity rather than your confusion, your sureness rather than your unsteadiness, as you begin to get glimpses and you begin to deliberately want to practice the vibration of that well-being, what begins to happen to you, of course, you're going to rendezvous with all kinds of things. You're out here in the world, and there is nothing that comes to you that does not come on the powerful, well-defined, always accurate, always fair basis of law of attraction. Nothing ever comes to you that isn't about that. But we want you to know, you have the choice in every moment to define how you want to feel. And if your desire to feel good is strong enough, you will always find a way to come back into your power. So now the man from State Farm is looking at the front of Esther's car, and Esther is explaining to him how it happened, really wanting him to know she just didn't bump it up on something. He actually didn't care how it happened. He was just there to assess what had happened and to make a determination about it. But Esther is explaining it to him. And he said, I worked for Ford. I had a couple of those Mustangs. They are really squirrely. The back end of those fishtails, they get away from you. They are really, really hard on wet pavement. And it was raining that day. And then Esther went to her hairdresser and is explaining to her hairdresser, in case she happens to see the car in the parking lot, and her hairdresser said, I had 2 Mustangs. They are really difficult on wet roads. There's something about the back end of those that makes them really hard to control. And suddenly, Esther is feeling relief because she had been holding that one little nugget of blame to that little 18-year-old girl who the last time she saw her was in the parking lot crying until her eyelashes were coming off, wanting Esther to know that she didn't mean to do it, she didn't mean to do it, she didn't mean to do it, she didn't mean to do it. So Esther called her father and said, I just want you to know that 2 people today told me exactly the same thing, and I think we should all let your little girl off the hook on this. He said, what do you have to say? And Esther said, those cars are hard to manage on the wet roads. We were all too hard on her. And Esther could feel the relief coming over him. And she knows that there was soon to be relief coming over this little girl, because everything that happens is a co-creation. And when you decide that you're going to blame the one who seemed at most fault instead of take responsibility for the part you play, the reason you feel so awful is not because you're mad at the little girl. It's because you're all upside down about how things are being created in your reality. You are running around this planet as cooperative components to one another, not to do bad things to each other and not to teach other lessons, but to sift through the data to put things in your vortex to which your inner being is already aligned so that you can experience the joy of alignment. So then Esther began noticing what fun it was. She met a whole host of new people on the process of getting this into alignment, and there's still more to come. More lovely people interacting on different levels. Isn't that what life is all about? And so, of course, you don't want someone to bury their Mustang in the front of your vehicle. That's not our message here at all. But we are acknowledging that there are plenty of things that you don't want that are bumping into you. Plenty of things that you don't want that are bumping into you. And your reaction to the bump, it's normal when you first get bumped to have a knee-jerk reaction. Maybe if you don't really understand who you are. But in time, the woman who drove the Jaguar was standing in a more stable place than Esther in terms of her life. Her husband came to assess it, and they were both smiling in the parking lot. And Esther said to both of them, "Stop smiling." You are far too happy. This is what I teach, but it is not what I live. You are smiling too much here. And of course she didn't mean it, but isn't it annoying to see someone living the exact thing that you are living and feeling so differently about it, you see? And what we're wanting you to understand is that the source within you, that your inner being, that who you really are, that is converging with you out here on the leading edge of that which you are living, that source within you has a different opinion often than you do if you feel anything less than wonderful. The source within you is always acknowledging the value in the rendezvous. The source within you is always looking for the positive aspects and the benefit of. And when you make one small decision, and it really is a smaller decision than any of you realize, when you make the small decision that you are going to feel good no matter what, that today, no matter what you are doing or where you are going or who you are doing it with, that you're going to look for reasons to feel good, you begin to tune yourself to the vibration of the source within you, and then that becomes your dominant point of attraction. Instead of some conversation, you see, everything that happens has some law of attraction vibrational hook. It was not accidental that occurred right after Esther had fanned the flames of people doing weird things in traffic that made her a vulnerable target. It's not an odd thing. It was not a strange coincidence that as Esther came into the parking lot, she picked that place to park. None of this is accidental. Nothing is accidental. Everything is vibrationally aligned. And the composite of vibrations that you hold are all part of it. So was this an awful thing that happened? Certainly not. Are there awful things that happen? No, not really. This is the thing that we want you to understand. From your broader point of view, everything fits into vibrational alignment with the well-being that you want and deserve. And as you begin looking for evidence of that, you begin living more of those moments so that it's peak, 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 peak. It was a peak moment for Esther when she called that father and explained to him her newfound perspective and expressed through the tone in her voice and through the conversation that she had her genuine love and appreciation, her genuine affection and desire for well-being for the young girl who just 2 days before had caused her something entirely different than that, or at least that was the credit that Esther was giving to her. When you come back into alignment, it's because you have aligned with your inner being. When you feel good, it's because you've aligned with who you are. When you feel bad, it is because you are not aligning with who you are. And whoever is running into the front of your car is irrelevant to the equation, really, 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 really.